I heard him before I saw him. My father had a voice that carried easily across rooms, the same way it used to travel across the backyard when he called me in for dinner. Years ago it had been comforting. Now, it mostly announced him. The officers' dining hall was loud with silverware and low conversation, but his laugh cut through it. "She's a nurse on one of the Air Force bases," he said. I paused near the doorway. He was seated with 3 men who still had the relaxed posture of people who'd spent the morning on a golf course. Jackets off, sleeves rolled slightly, the faint smell of grass still clinging to them. "Not exactly brain surgery," he added with a chuckle. The men smiled politely. "Probably just gives pilots their flu shots." More laughter. Not cruel. Just the kind people offer when someone tells a harmless joke. I stayed where I was. 12 feet away. I'd been standing there long enough to hear the entire conversation, long enough that walking forward now would feel like interrupting. I thought about doing it anyway. Then I remembered being 17. I had been standing in the kitchen explaining that I wanted to join the Air Force Medical Corps. I had rehearsed the speech for days, about discipline, service, medicine, about wanting to do something that mattered. He'd leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Nurse, huh?" he'd said. The word had sounded small when he said it. "Someone's gotta hand out the band-aids." I stopped correcting him a long time ago. Not because I was angry. Just because it never seemed to change anything. Across the dining hall he was still talking. One of the golfers asked which base. My father shrugged vaguely. "Somewhere out west, big place." Behind him, a woman at another table had stopped eating. 2 silver stars rested on the shoulders of her uniform. I noticed her because she noticed me. Her eyes moved from my face to the small metal pin on my lapel. Recognition passed across her expression, not surprise, just confirmation. Then she set down her fork. The sound was soft, but the effect traveled. The table she sat at fell quiet first. Then the table my father was at seemed to sense something had shifted, though no one had spoken yet. The general turned slightly in her chair. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled in the way senior officers' voices tend to be. Not loud, but it carried weight. My father looked over, mid-smile. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded toward me. "I believe you're referring to Colonel Harris." For a moment he didn't turn around. Maybe he assumed she meant someone else. Then he followed her gaze. And saw me. It took a second for recognition to land. Not because he didn't know my face, because he hadn't expected to see me standing there. The room had gone very still. The general continued, still polite. "She commands this installation." The sentence was delivered the way someone might clarify a logistical detail. Nothing dramatic. Just factual. But the effect was immediate. Chairs straightened. The easy posture at the golf table disappeared. My father stood halfway out of his chair before realizing he wasn't sure if he should. I walked toward them. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just across the 12 feet that had suddenly become very quiet. The general gave me a small nod as I approached. "Colonel." "Mom." One of the golfers cleared his throat. Another adjusted his napkin as if it had suddenly become complicated. My father looked at my uniform again, as though seeing it for the first time. He started, then stopped. The general asked me a brief question about an upcoming training exercise on the East Range. Something procedural. Something routine. I answered the way I would in any meeting: short, precise, professional. The table listened carefully now. When the exchange ended, the general picked up her fork again. "Carry on," she said lightly to the room. Conversation slowly returned, though softer than before. I took the empty chair beside my father. For several minutes we both focused on our plates. Eventually he leaned slightly toward me. "I didn't realize you were in charge of the whole base." His voice wasn't joking anymore. "Most people don't," I said. That was the end of it for a while. Dinner continued. The golfers asked me a few questions about aircraft operations, about how large the installation was. I answered them calmly, the way you answer curious civilians. No one mentioned flu shots again. Later, outside the dining hall, my father and I stood near the walkway lights. The night air smelled faintly like jet fuel drifting from the runway. He looked at the buildings, the rows of aircraft silhouettes in the distance. "This is all yours?" he asked quietly. "Temporarily," I said. "Commands rotate." He nodded slowly. "I guess I didn't understand what you were doing all these years." It wasn't an apology exactly. Just an admission. I thought about correcting him now. Explaining the deployments, the hospitals, the long chain of assignments that led here. But I didn't. "You don't really see the whole picture from the outside," I said instead. He studied my uniform again. For the first time I noticed something in his expression that hadn't been there when I was younger. Not pride. Something closer to recalculation, as if he were adjusting a story he'd been telling himself for a long time. "Well," he said finally. "That general seemed to think pretty highly of you." I looked out toward the runway lights. "She's the one who promoted me." He nodded again, slower this time. Neither of us said much after that, but when we walked back toward the parking lot, he stayed half a step behind me. Not intentionally, I think. Just unsure, maybe, where he was supposed to stand now.